Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open up a spreadsheet that already has a data model behind it. So if you're looking at this, it, in essence, just like any other spreadsheet. The only difference is there's actually a PowerPivot model behind the scenes. We'll take a deeper dive in that in just a minute. But you also notice within my Excel spreadsheet there's a PowerPivot menu option up here in the upper right-hand corner. How you get that to show up in your ribbon is if you go to File and you go to Options and you go to Add-ins and you go down here to Excel add-ins, go to COM add-ins and hit Go. You'll see here there's a Microsoft Office PowerPivot for Excel and PowerView. We're not going to spend much time on PowerView as that's the visualization capabilities that you can leverage within a spreadsheet, a workbook, but Power BI seems to be a much better place to do that type of analysis. So, really from an ad hoc perspective, most users I think will probably stick to just Excel with PowerPivot. So once you enable that and just check that box, and you do, I think there are certain levels of Office or Excel. I think you have to be at least at a professional level. So if you have a personal or student level, probably does not have PowerPivot. But you enable that, and then you've got this PowerPivot menu option that allow you to go ahead and hit Manage, and we'll do that in a minute, behind the scenes. So the first thing we want to do now is let's just go in and say I want to create a new analysis, right? I want to look at, maybe I've got for my own use, or a manager said, hey, can you show me what our sales were year over year by channel and product? And so a user could open up this spreadsheet, select the cell. I'm going to go here to Insert. I'm going to just choose Insert Pivot Chart and Table. And here it's going to be a list if I had. And typically people that use pivot tables today, you know, you get your data, export into Excel spreadsheet in a big mass data dump. You select that grid of data and you build your pivot table from it. But the trouble a lot of people have is how then they get that data refreshed and usable. And some people create macros, but you're still limited to that million rows of the data dump into Excel, and that doesn't perform nearly as well as this in memory within PowerPivot. So the way we get to that PowerPivot model behind the scene, if I choose this Use an External Data Source and choose Connection, and this will open up in just a second. And as you can see down here, it says it's loading the data model. So it's saying, okay, what can this user grab? And then there's this data model that's been labeled JDE. That's the connection, and we'll choose Open. And now I'll just choose OK. And that's going to basically place this pivot table. Now when I click on this pivot table, you'll see on the right, there's actually a lot of other folders over here that are all tailored for JDE, was already related. So looking at sales data, right, we've got some traditional sales information, but we've got some other criteria and descriptive nature around the customer. So in this case, like we said, we want to group this on and get a sales year over year for channel. So I'll just drag channel down to my rows. Anybody who's not familiar with a pivot table in Excel, it aggregates the data for you, and then you can see here you've got rows, columns, values, and filters. So I'm going to drag channel down to my rows, and again, that was from our customer. Let's go down to maybe our item, and I'll choose our product group and drop that below our channel. So you can see in our pivot table, we've got one row for each channel and then product group, and now let's throw some amounts in there. So part of the modeling within the PowerPivot engine behind the scenes is we've gone in, tailored for J.D. Edwards, the relationships, and built these calculations. So you'll see here sales amount, month to date, year to date, quarter to date. So these are what are called DAX calculations. That's the language that you use in the modeling to build these types of calculated fields. So if I'll go ahead and choose our sales year to date, and then I'll drop down here and grab maybe our sales prior year, year to date. And now we can go ahead and let's just increase this a little bit bigger. Now what if we're looking at this and say, okay, that's pretty cool, but I want to see maybe instead of looking at sales by channel and by product group, what if we want those sales to be based on sales rep instead? So if we go back up to our list and go back to our customer, we can just drag and find down here maybe our sales rep. And I'll drag sales rep down and drag it right above my channel. So you see now we've got the breakdown. We can actually remove our channel here if we want. And now we can see our pivot table and our chart being updated for just sales rep and then product. Okay. What if we wanted to add a little bit more dynamic nature into this? Maybe some parameterized values, so I can select, different regions or different time frames to calculate year to date. So while I've got this pivot table selected, if I go to the Insert menu option, you'll notice this little item over here called a slicer. So if I click on a slicer, these are some dynamic filters, and if we go in, we can grab, let's say we want one for year and period. Let's say we want to go down and pull, let's go back and grab channel. And maybe let's say region. Okay. And that's pretty good. Okay. So now if we go and just drag in to the right, a little bigger. Now we only have just resize these guys a tad. And here we go. Okay, so now we can see, you can also take with these slicers, like these values, I've got a lot of extra space here. If I go to the columns, I can change that. We can see here we've got, a few years of data. I can resort this if I go to right-click on the slicer, slicer settings, descending order. So you notice right now it always pulls the latest value, and that's what determines what the year-to-date calc is based on, is the max value in this list. But with the slicer, if I change this to now pull 2009 period 10, this is now pulling year-to-date through 2009 period 10 instead of period 12 or period 7. So by just clicking around, you'll get the dynamic change in the values that you see here on the screen. Okay. So that's how we can add some slicers. If we want to look at just the sales for online, we can go ahead and click on online, and now it'll update all of our values here for online. You can, again, pick a different region. And so this is, again, a nice quick way for users to be able to slice and dice the data right here in Excel. Now, you asked the question, maybe I want to clean this up a little bit, so I'll call this a sales analysis. Maybe just do our normal, right? We want to go ahead and just get rid of our guidelines. We've got a kind of a blank canvas there. And right there, in essence, I've got this. I could forward this spreadsheet to somebody else, and it's static. If they have PowerPivot, they can then play with it themselves. How you refresh this data, if I go over here to data, you'll see this refresh option. I hit that refresh option, it'll actually go ahead and query the JD Edwards database and bring back the results right to the canvas. Okay, so that's how the back-end engine is connected, so you don't have to go in and do a bunch of macros or exports of data, or copy grids of data from inside JDE and paste them inside of Excel. It's all automated, and we'll get back to that. Actually, we'll go there in just a minute. I want to show a couple other things. Let's say we want to look at maybe more of a trend type flavor and looking at maybe more of a cross tab as well. So if we just take this tab, and I'll take this spreadsheet, I'll right-click on this and choose Move or Copy. I'll move this to the end, create a copy. Okay. So now we're in a separate tab. I want to, let's say, move the pivot table down below and throw our chart on top of it. So I'll go up here and click on the Analyze tab and hit Move Pivot Table. And I'll, let's say, move it down here, maybe. Okay. In this case, oops, let me undo that. Just grab this whole chart, and I'll move this up a little bit, and I'll spread it across. Okay, so if we go back here, right now we still had our pivot table just like what we had from the other tab based on sales rep and then product group. Let's go ahead and add a time dimension into that. So if we go here to our calendar, and we'll grab our year quarter. I'm going to drag that above sales rep. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just collapse that. So right now I've only got one quarter because I've got just that year period selected. So I'll uncheck that selection here. And now we can kind of see multiple years of data. If we want to just turn that chart into more of a line chart, we can see here our year-to-date trend. But for this, let's look at our trend, not year-to-date. So instead of looking at our values year-to-date, let's go ahead and look at just our total sales maybe and gross profit. So I'll go ahead and remove those fields. We'll go back up here to our sales. And you'll notice here all these naming conventions. Inside JDE, or JD Edwards, you've got the cryptic MCMCU for the business unit, and AB AN8 for the address, code, dates and decimals. So all of that's handled by our data QuickLaunch on the database and these models that we've already got canned for JD Edwards. So if I just grab sales amount and maybe look at gross profit amount, we can now see our trend. Now, the other thing that's kind of neat when you're going to do a trend is we can go do a little cleanup job here, hide all field buttons on chart. We can still go back and click on our slice and look at just central or online. But we can also go in and add what's called a timeline. Okay, so if I click on this pivot table and we go to insert, next to slicer is what's called a timeline. So if we go ahead and select our timeline, or your date, it's got to be based on a date type field. And with a timeline, what it can do, expand that just a little bit. So it starts by, you say, okay, let's take a look at what years we want. So in this case, I want, let's just say 2008 and 2009. So it'll update just your chart just to be that. You can go and say, let's look at by quarters. So in this scenario, I want to look at just 4 quarters, so quarters 1 through 4. But then I want to look at a rolling, so I want to look at maybe quarters 2 through quarter 1 of the next year, right? Or quarters 3 through quarter 2. Or I want to look at the total of these 7 quarters or something, right? So you can go ahead and just, it goes all the way down to the months and days. What if we wanted to look at this chart not just by sales and gross profit, but also we want to maybe see a channel. So if we go back up here to our customer and choose channel and drop that into our columns, right, we can now see all of those. In this case, let's just look at maybe just sales for this example. All right, so now we can see what our sales trend is by these, and again, just by clicking the different ranges, we kind of get, maybe look at Northeast instead. Okay. So again, this is PowerPivot. This is kind of more ad hoc. So it's the people that want to be analyzing JD Edwards data with Excel pivot tables and charts. This is kind of like the ideal tool for that specific use case. Okay. So one of the things we want to take a quick peek at is if I go in and look at behind the scenes, like how do we get to that model that that was behind the scenes here of our, so if I go back to PowerPivot and hit the manage, you'll see it's going to open up behind the scenes all of those, and in essence what that is each of those tabs where we saw customer, we saw item, we saw sales, calendar. So these are all different kind of queries that are hitting JD Edwards, hitting basically our data quick views over JD Edwards. And based on that, you basically have the, let's show you the diagram. So you can relate data together. And the beauty of this is that you can pull data from JD Edwards, but you can also then pull in data that's outside of JD Edwards. It could either be in a spreadsheet, could be in an Oracle database or iSeries, or any other OLEDB, ODBC compliant data source could be leveraged here. So you can see here, you can model the data together, you can join it. You'll notice up here under other data sources, so you can connect to, again, SQL Server, Azure, Access, Oracle, Teradata, Sybase, IBM, OLEDB, ODBC. You go down here, you can pull in from an Excel file. You just also grab data from, if you're using Microsoft's analysis services, that can be a data source as well, which you see here. And then what we're showing you before in those calculations is you have the ability to go in and build these types of So on here, you've got all these calcs, and so this is where we go in and you build these calculations that are driven by that calendar type date. And so this is what's called DAX. And so this is where you build, and we kind of give you with our models already these canned calculations. You can go and copy and paste and add new ones. You can kind of customize them with additional logic and business logic that you want. So again, if we call our stuff a quick launch, it's meant to be an accelerator for you to help you not have to recreate the wheel that's already been done. So that is the a quick sales example. Let's take a look at two things on the general ledger side.